Lieutenant Commander Emma Kane stepped off the bus at Naval Base Coronado, her boots sinking slightly into the fine, sun-bleached sand. The Pacific glittered under the early morning sun, waves crashing in a rhythmic, endless pattern, a sound both soothing and punishing, like the steady heartbeat of the ocean itself. She inhaled the salty air, letting it fill her lungs, yet her nerves were taut with anticipation. She was one of the very few women ever accepted into the SEAL training program, and every glance around the base reminded her how rare, how watched she truly was. From the moment she arrived, the tension was palpable. Officers and trainees alike stared openly, some with curiosity, some with thinly veiled skepticism. Whispers followed her steps, comments meant to undermine her. "She won't last a week," one murmured, clearly amused. Emma ignored them, focusing instead on her own mission. She had come to earn her place through strength, skill, and endurance, not by demanding respect or explaining herself. Every setback in her past had prepared her for this moment. Her first encounter with Captain Brent Walker was immediate and jarring. He was a figure built from decades of military discipline, his jaw tight, eyes sharp and scrutinizing. The lines etched into his face weren't just from age. They were carved by years of combat and command. He didn't bother to hide his disdain when he looked at Emma. "This isn't for showboats," he said, voice low, dangerous, carrying a weight that silenced everyone nearby. "You're either ready or you're not. There's no middle ground." Emma met his gaze with a calm she did not feel inside. She had trained herself for years to handle moments like this, confrontations that tested courage, poise, and restraint. Behind her controlled exterior, memories flickered. Her younger brother, lost in a training accident. The long nights spent running drills to prove herself in front of skeptical Marines. The quiet, lonely hours spent lifting herself up when the world insisted she would fail. That pain had become armor. She wasn't here to confront Captain Walker's ego, nor to battle the murmuring recruits. She was here to claim a place she had earned, nothing more, nothing less. The base itself was a world apart, an ecosystem of rigor and relentless standards. Soldiers ran past with weighted packs, screaming in unison as instructors shouted orders. The air filled with the scent of salt, sweat, and ozone from the nearby surf. Each sound, each movement was a test, even for someone like Emma. The SEAL program was infamous for breaking the unprepared, mentally, physically, emotionally. Failure here was not merely a matter of dropping out. It was about survival. Every decision, every movement, could be the difference between life and death in a real-world mission. As she walked toward the barracks, Emma's eyes scanned the horizon. The beach stretched endlessly, the surf glinting like shards of silver. She watched a group of men dragging a log across the sand, a test of sheer endurance. Some stumbled, collapsing in the sand, only to be pulled up by a drill instructor's firm hand. The scene reminded her of her own journey, long, grueling, relentless, and sometimes humiliating. She remembered the countless hours she had spent in small, dimly lit gyms, lifting, running, drilling herself beyond exhaustion, all in preparation for moments like this. Captain Walker approached, his steps deliberate, boots sinking slightly into the sand with each stride. He stopped a few feet away, arms crossed over his chest, his gaze scanning her with calculated intensity. "Lieutenant Kane," he said, his voice carrying across the beach, sharp and unyielding. "I hope you understand what you're walking into. SEAL training isn't for the faint of heart. It will strip you down, tear you apart, and test everything you think you know about yourself. Most people break. Some disappear entirely. I don't care which category you fall into, but I do care about the standard. The standard is absolute. Do you understand?" Emma nodded once, her voice steady. "Yes, sir." It was simple, precise, no room for argument. But inside, her heart beat faster than she let anyone see. She knew the road ahead would be punishing. She knew she would be tested in ways no one could predict. And she knew deep down that nothing she had endured before compared to the physical and mental storm that awaited her here. Yet she also knew she had no choice. This was the path she had chosen, and she would see it through, no matter the cost. Other trainees began to trickle into the area, some sizing her up, others ignoring her entirely. She noticed the subtle glances, the whispered bets on how long she would last. Most expected her to falter early, to crumble under the weight of the relentless physical punishment and the psychological warfare. Emma didn't flinch. She had spent her life defying expectations, proving herself when the odds were stacked against her. This was no different. She would endure. She would persist. And when the moment came, she would rise above it all. By midday, the first grueling exercises began. Trainees were ordered into the surf, running into waist-deep waves while carrying heavy packs. Captain Walker watched, silent, calculating, as Emma plunged into the cold water. The shock of the Pacific against her skin was nothing new. She had trained in harsher conditions back home, yet the chill reminded her that every moment here demanded vigilance. Her body moved with precision, each stroke and step purposeful. She was not just surviving. She was adapting, reading the environment, measuring the limitations of her own body. Hours passed in a blur of drills, shouts, and exhaustion. By late afternoon, the sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold. Emma stood at the water's edge, her lungs burning, her muscles screaming, yet her posture remained erect, unbroken. Captain Walker's eyes met hers briefly. There was no acknowledgement, no concession, only the silent calculation of a man trying to measure a storm he could not yet control. Emma, however, understood the unspoken truth. Respect here was not given. It was earned. And she intended to earn it, not with words, but with action. As the first day drew to a close, Emma returned to the barracks, her body exhausted, her mind alert. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, reflecting on the journey ahead. She knew the days would be longer, the nights colder, the tests harsher. But she also knew that every challenge she faced here would shape her into the kind of SEAL she was determined to become, fearless, relentless, and unshakable. Tomorrow, the real trial would begin, and she would be ready. The Pacific waves continued to crash outside, relentless and eternal. Emma closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. This was only the beginning. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something that had nothing to do with fear. She felt purpose. She felt the storm inside her rising, a storm no one, not even Captain Walker, would ever break. The next morning, the sun had barely crested over the horizon when Emma Kane was already awake, her eyes tracing the pale streaks of light across the barracks walls. Sleep had come only briefly, a shallow, uneasy rest punctuated by the memory of the first day's grueling exercises. She swung her legs off the cot, feeling the lingering ache in her muscles, and silently thanked the early hours, the calm before the storm. Today, she knew, would be worse. SEAL training was designed to break anyone who thought they were ready. By 0500, the platoon assembled on the beach again. The chill from the ocean breeze bit through their wet training uniforms, the cold exacerbating their exhaustion from yesterday. Captain Walker stood at the front, arms crossed, eyes scanning every face like a predator assessing prey. His gaze lingered on Emma longer than the others, a mixture of skepticism and irritation etched into his features. He had already begun to see that she was different, resilient, focused, and utterly unflinching. Yet that realization didn't translate into respect. If anything, it fueled his need to test her further. The first exercise was a log carry. A 20-foot log, wet and heavy, would be lifted and transported across the sand by 4 trainees at a time. Many stumbled on the first attempt, their hands blistered and their arms trembling from the weight. Emma was assigned with 2 men who had already grumbled about being paired with her. "You sure she can handle it?" one muttered under his breath. Emma didn't answer. She simply positioned herself under the log, muscles coiled like a spring, and lifted. The log shook, sand poured from the edges, but she kept it steady, her arms and legs burning with effort. Captain Walker watched silently. "Faster," he barked finally, his voice cutting through the sound of the waves. Emma tightened her grip and surged forward. One man faltered, dropping his end, and she compensated immediately, lifting the log with every ounce of strength in her body to keep it from falling. Sweat stung her eyes, her back screamed, and her lungs burned, yet she didn't slow. The others looked at her with disbelief, muttering under their breaths. "How is she still moving?" she heard one say. Walker's jaw tightened. He had expected her to falter within minutes. She hadn't. When they finally dropped the log onto the sand, Emma's arms trembled violently, her palms raw and bloody, but she stood tall, breathing steadily, refusing to collapse. Walker strode up to her, the sand crunching beneath his boots. "Not bad," he said, voice low, almost grudging. "But this is just the beginning." He turned to the rest of the platoon. "You think you've seen strength? You haven't seen anything yet. Everything you've done so far is nothing compared to what's coming." His eyes flicked back to Emma. "And you, Kane, you're about to learn that SEAL training doesn't forgive mistakes." The next drill was a water endurance test. Trainees were pushed into the surf, bodies submerged repeatedly, forced to tread water while holding weighted packs above their heads. Hypothermia loomed in the cold Pacific. Exhaustion clawed at their muscles, and the relentless instructors circled, shouting, punishing, scrutinizing. Emma moved with precision, her body cutting through the water efficiently, her head clear despite the pounding waves. Every inhalation, every stroke was deliberate, honed from years of preparation. She noticed others faltering around her, gasping, panicked, cursing the cold. She didn't look away. She didn't slow. Walker's frustration grew with each minute. Here was a recruit who refused to break under physical duress, who outpaced several men in both endurance and strength, who carried herself with unwavering poise. It should have been impossible, and yet it wasn't. "Extra laps?" he barked suddenly, pointing at her. "You're not done until I say you're done." Emma's chest rose and fell rapidly, her muscles screaming in protest, but she complied immediately. She pushed herself through wave after wave, each repetition a testament to her determination, each lap a quiet defiance against the doubters watching. By midday, the sun hung high in the sky, baking the sand and reflecting harshly off the water. The platoon staggered, drenched and exhausted, some collapsing completely, others barely moving. Emma's body was on fire, every muscle aching, every joint screaming, but her mind remained clear. Captain Walker walked past her, eyes narrowing. "Still standing," he muttered. He didn't expect this. She shouldn't still be standing. The thought gnawed at him, the sting of pride he refused to acknowledge openly. The final test of the day was the obstacle course, a grueling combination of walls, ropes, mud pits, and climbing towers designed to push recruits to the edge. Emma's legs were like lead, but she vaulted over each obstacle with a grace that belied her exhaustion. She climbed ropes with blistered hands, scaled walls that had left others battered and bloody, and navigated the mud pits without faltering. The instructor shouted, whistles blew, waves of exhaustion and adrenaline mixed into a chaotic storm around her. Yet she moved with the clarity of purpose only someone who had trained for years could sustain. Walker watched from the top of a tower, his face tight, jaw clenched. He had tried to humiliate her, push her past breaking point, yet she refused to falter. Each successful movement, each stride, each pull-up in the air was another reminder that she would not bend to his ego or intimidation. He hated it. He hated her endurance, her calm, her quiet defiance. And yet, something inside him shifted. He couldn't deny it. She was exceptional. Perhaps the best he had ever seen in his long career. The final challenge came just before sunset. The team run across the beach carrying full packs. Emma fell into the rhythm of her group, matching pace, supporting weaker recruits, pushing forward when others faltered. The weight of exhaustion pressed against her chest, threatening to collapse her with each step, but she ignored it. Pain was temporary. Failure was not an option. Her focus was absolute. The horizon, the sand beneath her feet, the pulse of the ocean beside her. Nothing else existed. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand, the day was over. Trainees collapsed, coughing, vomiting, groaning in exhaustion. Emma stood, lungs burning, sweat and seawater dripping from her hair, her uniform torn and bloodied from blisters. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply stood, silent, and watched the ocean. Captain Walker approached, boots heavy in the sand, and for a moment, the two of them stared at each other. He didn't speak, didn't scold, didn't even acknowledge the effort she had endured. Yet the unspoken truth hung in the air. She had survived. Inside her, a quiet fire burned. She had faced the first real day of SEAL training and lived. She had endured Captain Walker's scrutiny, the physical torment, the mental assault. Most importantly, she had remained herself, unwavering, disciplined, unbroken. And she knew that tomorrow would be harder. The next test would push her further, demand more. But she also knew that each challenge she faced, each moment she endured, was one step closer to proving herself, not to Walker, not to anyone else, but to herself. The night settled over Coronado, waves crashing in endless rhythm. Emma Kane lay on her cot, muscles screaming in protest, mind alert despite exhaustion. She closed her eyes, listening to the distant calls of the ocean, letting her body recover while her mind prepared for what was coming. One thing was certain. She would not break. And those who thought they could intimidate her were about to learn the hard way that she was forged from something stronger than fear. She was forged from resolve, from loss, from fire. Tomorrow, the storm would continue, and Emma Kane would meet it head-on. The moon hung low over Coronado Bay, casting a silvery glow across the beach. The sound of waves hitting the shore was steady and relentless, like a metronome counting the seconds of their endurance. The platoon had been ordered into the surf for a midnight drill, a test of stamina, willpower, and nerve. Emma Kane's body was exhausted beyond measure, muscles screaming from hours of previous training, yet she moved with precise, controlled efficiency. Every stroke, every step was deliberate. She had learned long ago that panic was a luxury she could not afford. Captain Brent Walker had been watching her closely all evening. His eyes flicked between the other trainees and Emma, searching for a weakness, any sign of human frailty he could exploit. She had surpassed every expectation, endured every punishment, and yet there she was, standing tall, moving deliberately through the cold surf while others faltered. It wasn't just her skill or strength that unnerved him. It was her unwavering composure. Nothing he did, no shouting, no intimidation, no impossible drill, had managed to break her. And that fact irritated him deeply. The surf was rougher than usual that night, waves crashing violently against the group. "Stay low," Walker barked, voice cutting over the roar of the ocean. "Keep your packs above water. Move." A few men stumbled, falling under the crushing waves. Emma steadied one, pushing him back up with a firm hand. She knew the exercise wasn't just about endurance. It was about leadership. The SEAL ethos demanded that no one be left behind, and she took that responsibility seriously. Every decision she made could be the difference between life and injury. Then it happened. A misstep by one of the trainees sent their team veering too close to a jagged underwater rock. The pack got caught, pulling him under briefly. Emma acted immediately, reaching for him, securing him, and giving orders to the others with calm authority. Cover each other. Move now. Her voice was sharp, precise, unflinching. It drew attention, not just from the men struggling in the water, but from Walker himself. Walker's temper had already been fraying all day. He had underestimated Emma from the start, expected her to break, to cry, to plead, and she had done none of it. Seeing her take control at a crisis triggered something deep in him. A need to reassert dominance, to remind everyone, including himself, who was in charge. He strode forward, waves splashing around his boots, voice raised above the roar of surf. "Kane," he shouted, "do you think you're in charge? Follow my orders now." Emma didn't flinch. "Sir," she said, steady and controlled, "I'm following orders while keeping the team safe." "Your order would have put him at risk." She didn't hesitate, didn't waver. Her words weren't disrespectful. They were matter of fact. But in Walker's eyes, they were an affront. For decades, he had been the one issuing commands, the one expecting obedience without question. And here was a young officer, a woman, standing firm against him. Pride, anger, and old insecurities surged through him in a flash. He moved toward her with sudden aggression. The movement was swift, almost instinctual, the body of a seasoned combatant reacting before the mind could intervene. He grabbed her vest with a force meant to intimidate and slammed her down onto the wet, cold sand. Emma's body hit the ground hard. The wind knocked from her lungs. Waves lapped around her, soaking her uniform and hair. Before she could respond, Walker drove his knee into her head, a calculated act of dominance meant to break her. Pain exploded in her skull, stars dancing behind her eyes. For a moment, the platoon froze. Silence cut through the roar of the ocean. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Emma lay there, dazed but not defeated. Blood mixed with seawater as she slowly lifted her head, staring up at Walker with eyes that were anything but broken. There was no anger, no desperation, only calm and measured defiance. Her lips parted, voice steady, almost chilling in its composure. "Permission to continue, sir?" Walker paused, startled. He had expected her to scream, to beg, to collapse under the weight of his authority. But she didn't. She stared at him, unflinching, unwavering. That single look, filled with quiet resolve and refusal to submit, struck him harder than any physical blow. He released her, stepping back as though the realization of his own behavior had hit him with unexpected force. The other trainees began moving again, unsure what to do, unsure whether to intervene, unsure whether this had just crossed a line that could not be undone. Emma slowly pushed herself up, every movement deliberate. Her bloodied hair clung to her face, and sand caked her uniform, yet she remained composed. She didn't shout, she didn't curse, she didn't retaliate. She simply turned her focus back to the task at hand, leading the team through the surf safely. The incident had not shaken her. If anything, it sharpened her resolve. She had been pushed to the edge, but she had not fallen. Walker, standing just a few feet away, felt an unfamiliar unease. The pride that had defined his career now fought a gnawing fear, a recognition that this woman, this officer, was something he could not control with intimidation alone. He had assumed physical dominance would guarantee compliance. It hadn't, and that realization unsettled him in ways he had not expected. For the first time, He truly measured her strength, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Minutes later, the drill continued, and Walker maintained a cold, tense silence. No further aggression was displayed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The trainees moved cautiously, some stealing glances at Emma, silently acknowledging the courage it took to endure what had just happened. Whispers began circulating, murmurs of disbelief, admiration, and respect for her composure under such extreme duress. She had survived not just the ocean and the exercises, but an intentional act of cruelty, and she had done so without faltering. When the drill finally ended, Emma collapsed on the sand briefly, letting her body rest while keeping her mind alert. Her heartbeat gradually slowed, the pounding in her skull a dull ache now manageable. She had faced humiliation, aggression, and the full force of a man trained to dominate. She had survived. And in doing so, she had demonstrated something far more powerful than brute strength, an unshakable will, a mastery over fear, and the ability to remain composed when every instinct screamed to react. Walker watched from a distance, the sound of the waves filling the space between them. Something inside him shifted again, a grudging acknowledgement of her capabilities, though his pride kept him from admitting it openly. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "You have no idea what you're dealing with." It was not a threat. It was a warning, an admission of the truth he couldn't yet face. Emma Kane was a force, and he had just witnessed the first real proof of it. The moonlight reflected off the ocean, casting long shadows on the wet sand. The platoon began returning to the barracks quietly, each trainee lost in their own thoughts. Emma walked slowly, deliberately, her body aching but her mind focused. She knew the incident would ripple through the ranks, perhaps reaching the eyes of command. She didn't fear reprisal. She didn't fear consequences. She simply knew she had done what needed to be done. She had stood firm, protected her team, and shown that courage could not be measured by size, authority, or brutality. That night, as she lay on her cot in the barracks, Emma replayed every moment in her mind, analyzing, reflecting, learning. The ocean's roar was distant, but constant, a reminder that the world was vast, dangerous, and relentless, just like the path she had chosen. She understood one thing clearly. The coming days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, and Captain Walker would not forget her defiance. But she also knew she would not break. Not now, not ever. And so, under the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant crashing of the Pacific, Lieutenant Commander Emma Kane rested, a quiet storm gathering strength within, ready for whatever came next. The morning air at Naval Base Coronado was unusually crisp, carrying the faint scent of salt and damp sand. Inside the administrative building, the tension was palpable. Emma Kane sat upright in the hard chair, her uniform immaculate despite the exhaustion from the previous night's drills. Across the room, Captain Brent Walker paced, his expression a mask of controlled anger, the kind that barely hid the unease creeping beneath his pride. This was not just another training day. Today, the consequences of last night's incident, the knee to her head, the assault, were being addressed formally. The hearing room was quiet, except for the soft shuffle of papers and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. A panel of Navy officers sat at a long table, their expressions neutral but attentive. Each officer represented years of experience and authority, tasked with weighing evidence impartially. Emma's pulse remained steady, though her mind ran with meticulous focus, recalling every detail of the previous night's events. Her report had been submitted carefully and factually, leaving out emotion and hyperbole. There was no room for exaggeration. Only truth could carry weight here. Walker entered the room last, his boots echoing sharply on the linoleum floor. He carried himself with the confidence of a man used to command, yet his eyes flicked repeatedly toward Emma, Something in her stance, the calm composure that had unsettled him on the beach, gnawed at him now. He had expected fear, submission, even anger. What he found instead was unshakable resolve. The realization made him uncomfortable in a way he wasn't used to. She wasn't merely a subordinate. She was a mirror reflecting the flaws in his own character. The hearing began with formalities. Officers read the statements submitted by witnesses, trainees who had seen everything on the beach. The accounts were precise. The sequence of the altercation, Walker's aggressive actions, and Emma's composed reaction. Some of the junior trainees, who had initially doubted her abilities, now testified with admiration, detailing how she had taken control during a dangerous situation. One young SEAL candidate, voice trembling with nervous excitement, described how Emma had prevented serious injury when Walker's actions could have caused lasting harm. When it came time for Walker to speak, he rose slowly, his tone measured but defensive. "I acted under extreme stress," he stated. "The conditions were chaotic. My intent was never to injure. I expected compliance. I expected respect." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of authority, but lacking conviction. Emma listened, calm, eyes focused, absorbing every syllable, noting every subtle twitch of the captain's face that betrayed unease. She understood pride. She understood ego. And she understood how to let the facts speak louder than emotion. Finally, it was Emma's turn to address the panel. She stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes meeting each officer with quiet authority. Her voice was clear, steady, and measured. Captain Walker's actions were unnecessary and dangerous. The team was under my supervision during a hazardous exercise. I acted to prevent harm, not to challenge authority. Leadership is not defined by intimidation or brute force. It is defined by the protection and guidance of those entrusted to your command. Every word was precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. There was a pause after she finished. The panel exchanged brief, subtle glances, the kind that spoke volumes to anyone attuned to military protocol. Walker's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, he found himself without a ready rebuttal. Emma had not attacked his character. She had not sought vengeance. She had simply spoken truth. And the truth, no matter how measured, carried more weight than years of reputation or rank when the evidence corroborated her account. During cross-examination, Walker struggled. Questions were sharp, deliberate, designed to expose inconsistency or exaggeration. But Emma's answers were methodical, factual, and calm. She did not flinch when asked to recount the moment he drove his knee into her head. She described it with clinical accuracy, emphasizing the danger it presented to herself and the team. Witness testimonies, including video evidence and reports from other trainees, corroborated her statements. The panel nodded silently at key points, absorbing the undeniable proof before them. Outside the room, whispers began circulating among other personnel. Emma's composure, her refusal to show fear or anger, and her ability to speak with clarity and authority had created a ripple effect. Some trainees quietly expressed respect. Others, including officers who had previously doubted her presence in SEAL training, were now quietly reassessing her. Even Walker could feel the subtle shift. The room no longer aligned with his authority in the way it had always done. For the first time, he was not the undisputed force in the room. The panel adjourned briefly for deliberation. Emma remained seated, breathing steadily, her mind analyzing potential outcomes. She understood the stakes. Walker's career hung in the balance, as did her credibility and reputation. Yet she also understood that her purpose was not to destroy him, but to uphold the integrity of the program and protect those who would come after her. She thought of the teen in the surf, of the men she had guided to safety, and of the unspoken vow she had made to herself, to never break, no matter the cost. When the panel returned, Walker was called to stand. The officer at the head of the table cleared his throat. "Captain Walker," he began, voice firm but fair. "The evidence has been reviewed, including multiple witness statements, video documentation, and Lieutenant Commander Kane's testimony. Your conduct during the beach exercise was deemed dangerous and inappropriate. You are hereby suspended pending further action and may be subject to formal reprimand or demotion." Walker's face was a mask of controlled fury. His mind raced, calculating, defending, justifying. Yet there was no room for argument. The evidence was overwhelming. He finally muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else, "You think you've won. You have no idea who you're dealing with." His words were sharp, threatening, but lacked the power they once carried. Emma remained seated, expression neutral, her body calm, her mind alert. She understood what he meant, and she did not flinch. The hearing concluded with formalities, orders for Walker's temporary suspension, and instructions for both parties to resume standard duties with caution. Emma left the room quietly, head held high, her every step measured and precise. Outside, the sun was higher in the sky, bathing the base in harsh light that reflected off the pavement like glass. She inhaled deeply, feeling the ocean breeze on her face, letting it wash over the tension of the morning. She had faced not just physical and psychological assault, but institutional authority itself, and she had stood firm. Later, in the privacy of the barracks, Emma reflected on the hearing. Her body still ached from the beach incident, her skull tender, but her mind was clear. She understood that leadership was not about rank or fear. It was about responsibility, courage, and integrity. She had proven that even against overwhelming intimidation, even against a man trained to dominate, truth and composure could prevail. The night would come again, the surf would crash again, and the challenges of SEAL training were far from over. But Emma Kane had survived the first true test of authority, of courage, and of her own unyielding will. She was no longer just a recruit. She was a force, measured not by her gender or rank, but by her actions, her integrity, and her unwavering strength. And Captain Brent Walker? For the first time, he had been forced to see her not as a subordinate or a challenge to his authority, but as a reflection of the very standard he had once upheld, and perhaps the standard he had lost sight of along the way. The ocean waves crashed in the distance, eternal and relentless, and Emma Kane closed her eyes, letting the sound remind her of the path she had chosen, a path of endurance, courage, and unbreakable resolve. Tomorrow, the training would continue, and she would meet it as she had met every trial so far, with calm, precision, and unwavering determination. Weeks had passed since the hearing, and Naval Base Coronado had returned to its relentless rhythm of drills, exercises, and discipline. Emma Kane had resumed her training, her reputation quietly solidified among the recruits. She had earned respect not through words, but through action, resilience, and unwavering composure under impossible pressure. Yet a new challenge awaited, a joint field exercise in Virginia, designed to test SEAL teams in a simulated live-fire environment. The mission would push every trainee to their limits, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And much to Emma's silent apprehension, Captain Brent Walker was temporarily reinstated as her commanding officer. The morning of the exercise dawned gray and heavy with mist. The forest surrounding the base was dense, trees stretching high, casting long shadows across the muddy ground. Emma and the platoon moved in formation, weapons slung but ready, packs heavy with supplies. Walker walked alongside her, tension radiating from every step. His face was a mask of control, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. He had been forced back into active command for this exercise, and the memory of the previous incident on the beach weighed heavily on him. He was determined not to falter again. The briefing was concise and direct. The team would navigate through the forest, simulating reconnaissance and engagement with an opposing militia force. The terrain was unforgiving, muddy and uneven, with hidden obstacles and realistic hazards. "This is a test of leadership, endurance, and decision-making under fire," an officer stated. "Casualties are simulated, but the consequences of poor judgment are real. Every decision matters." Emma listened attentively, committing the mission parameters to memory, mentally planning contingencies for every possible scenario. As the exercise began, the team moved cautiously through the forest. Emma led from the front, scanning the terrain, noting potential ambush points, and maintaining constant communication with her teammates. Her focus was absolute, her body moving with fluid precision, honed from countless hours of training. Walker followed, attempting to assert control, but quickly realized that Emma's decisions were not only sound, but superior under pressure. His pride bristled, but his instincts as a soldier forced him to trust her judgment. A bitter pill swallowed quietly. The first simulated engagement came abruptly. A team of mock militia emerged from the trees, firing blanks that simulated live rounds. Chaos erupted instantly, with trainees diving for cover, shouting commands, and scrambling to respond. Walker froze momentarily, his attention scattered between issuing orders and reacting to the sudden threat. Emma, however, moved instinctively. She signaled cover fire, coordinated the team's movements, and ensured that simulated casualties were attended to swiftly. Every decision was deliberate, every command clear and authoritative. Within moments, she had regained control of the situation. Walker found himself relying on her without even realizing it. His voice, once the dominant force in the unit, became secondary as he deferred to her rapid, decisive actions. She moved to his side, guiding him to cover during a simulated grenade assault, and even directed him toward safer positions when he hesitated. It was an unspoken reversal of roles, and he felt an unfamiliar tension, the kind that comes when authority is challenged by skill, courage, and intelligence. He had underestimated her, and now he had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. The simulation grew increasingly complex. Obstacles, ambush points, and environmental hazards forced the team to improvise and adapt continuously. Emma's leadership was flawless. She moved through the forest like a shadow, silent and efficient, coordinating movements with minimal words yet maximum impact. She rescued an injured trainee from a simulated collapse, directing another to provide cover while signaling others to flank the enemy positions. Her tactical acumen was not theoretical. It was immediate, precise, and life-saving. Walker's respect, grudging at first, began to shift into something more profound. He could no longer see her as a subordinate or a challenger to his authority. She was a SEAL in the truest sense, disciplined, fearless, and capable of making split-second decisions that saved lives. And the bitter truth he had avoided acknowledging was undeniable. She had just saved his life in a real sense, within the context of the simulation, by guiding him to safety when he froze. The final scenario of the exercise tested extraction under enemy fire. The team had to evacuate through a narrow corridor in the forest, carrying injured trainees while under simulated attack. Emma directed the evacuation with clarity and authority, ensuring that each team member's role was precise and that simulated casualties were safely moved. Walker, despite his experience, found himself following her lead, aware that any attempt to override her plan would compromise the mission. She was in command, and the team thrived under her direction. When the simulated extraction was completed successfully, the platoon regrouped at the designated rendezvous point. Sweat, mud, and exhaustion coated every uniform, yet the team stood with a sense of accomplishment. Walker approached Emma, his steps deliberate, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the humid air. He looked her in the eyes, and for the first time, his respect was clear, unmasked by ego or pride. "You saved my ass," he admitted, his voice low, almost hesitant. Emma met his gaze evenly, saying nothing, only nodding in acknowledgement. The debriefing that followed reinforced the lessons of the day. Officers praised Emma's leadership, highlighting her ability to maintain calm under pressure, make rapid tactical decisions, and coordinate the team effectively. Walker remained silent, reflecting on the reality he had just witnessed. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be a ECAL, not just brute strength or rank, but composure, judgment, courage, and the unflinching ability to protect one's team at all costs. Emma Kane embodied every one of those qualities. As the team returned to the base, the weight of the day hung heavily on Walker's shoulders. He was a man who had always relied on authority and fear to maintain control, yet he had just witnessed a woman, a young officer, surpass him in leadership and decisiveness. It was a humbling experience, one he did not yet fully process. Emma, on the other hand, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had endured physical and psychological assault, navigated institutional bias, and emerged not just intact but stronger, proving her capabilities beyond question. By the time night fell, the forest exercise concluded, and the team returned to their quarters. Walker stood at the edge of the training field, staring at the dark horizon where the trees met the sky. He replayed every moment in his mind, the chaos of the ambush, Emma's calm authority, the precision of her actions. He understood that her performance had not only saved the team, but had also demonstrated a standard he had long forgotten. Pride wrestled with humility, and he realized that the path forward required recognition, not dismissal. Emma walked beside him silently, her uniform smeared with mud and sweat, her body aching, yet her mind alert. She had no desire for acknowledgement. She had led, she had protected, and she had proven herself. That was enough. And yet, she could feel the subtle shift in Walker, a grudging respect, or not of words, but of undeniable truth. She had transformed the exercise into more than a test of skill. It had become a lesson for him as well, one that he would not soon forget. The forest fell silent as night deepened, the mist curling around the trees, the faint rustle of nocturnal life filling the air. Emma Kane looked toward the horizon, the faint glow of the moon reflecting off the treetops. She had endured the impossible, navigated danger, and led with courage and precision. And for the first time, Captain Walker truly understood the depth of her strength, not just physical, but moral and intellectual, forged in adversity and tempered by resolve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new trials. But Emma Kane had proven something undeniable. Leadership could not be commanded through fear, authority alone, or brute force. True leadership, true strength, was demonstrated in moments of crisis, in the clarity of thought, and the courage to act decisively. And in the forests of Virginia, under simulated fire and chaos, she had proven she was a SEAL in every sense of the word. The early morning fog lingered over Naval Base Coronado as Emma Kane jogged along the shoreline, the damp sand sinking slightly under her boots. Her body still ached from the previous week's exercises in Virginia, but she moved with precise rhythmic steps, each one reinforcing the resolve that had carried her through months of grueling SEAL training. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light across the waves, and the only sounds were the ocean's steady rhythm and the faint creak of her own breathing. It was quiet, deceptive in its calmness, and she welcomed it. Captain Brent Walker appeared moments later, walking with measured steps along the wet sand. His uniform was worn and creased, his boots coated with mud from the field exercises, and his eyes betrayed the first hints of reflection Emma had ever seen in him. He didn't call out, didn't bark orders. Instead, he jogged quietly alongside her. For weeks after the Virginia field exercise, he had struggled internally. His pride demanded he assert authority. Yet every encounter with Emma reminded him of a truth he had long resisted. Skill, courage, and leadership were not defined by rank or ego. They were defined by action. "Morning, Kane," Walker said finally, his voice lower than usual, carrying a reluctant respect. Emma nodded, not stopping, keeping her pace steady. "Morning, sir." She didn't speak further. Words were unnecessary. The silence was a mutual acknowledgement of everything that had passed. The incident on the beach, the hearing, and the field exercises that had left him unsettled. The morning's training was brutal, even by SEAL standards. Recruits were forced into a simulated rescue operation along the cliffs, scaling rock faces with full packs while under harsh time constraints. Emma led from the front, every movement calculated and deliberate. She checked her team continuously, signaling instructions with concise gestures, adjusting positions to ensure balance and safety. Walker observed her closely, noting not only her technical skill, but the quiet authority she wielded without intimidation. At one point, a trainee's rope slipped while ascending a steep section, sending them tumbling back slightly. Emma reacted instantly, catching the rope and stabilizing it before anyone could panic. "Hold steady," she commanded, voice calm and precise. Her hands moved with practiced speed, correcting the trainee's grip and ensuring they could continue safely. Walker's jaw tightened. He had been through decades of training, yet he had never seen such flawless coordination under extreme stress, particularly from someone so young, and in his estimation, untested. The day progressed with relentless intensity. Obstacle courses, timed endurance runs, and tactical maneuvers tested every fiber of the recruit's strength. Emma's body ached constantly, yet she moved with a poise that inspired confidence in others. Walker noticed the subtle but powerful effects. The team instinctively followed her instructions, their trust in her unwavering. Even those who had initially doubted her resolve now moved with silent confidence, buoyed by her example. By late afternoon, the unit was exhausted, dripping with sweat and covered in mud. They gathered at a cliff edge overlooking the ocean, catching their breath before the final drill. Emma stood slightly apart, scanning the horizon, calculating wind patterns, and plotting the team's descent down the cliff to the extraction point. She noticed Walker hesitating nearby, staring at the vertical rock face. For a brief moment, he seemed almost uncertain, not about the mission, but about how to act in her presence. The dynamic between them had shifted, subtly yet irrevocably. "Commander Kane," Walker said finally, voice lower than usual, "I want you to lead the descent." His tone carried no condescension, no veiled threat, only trust. It was the first time he had ceded authority so openly, allowing her to guide the team without interference. Emma's eyes flicked to him, registering the significance of the moment. She simply nodded. "Understood, sir." No words of gratitude were necessary. The acknowledgement was mutual and quiet, the kind forged in the heat of battle and the weight of shared endurance. The descent was treacherous. Loose rocks and shifting gravel made every step a calculated risk. Emma moved methodically, signaling adjustments, distributing weight evenly, and ensuring the team maintained cohesion. One trainee slipped near the midpoint, and Emma caught their arm instantly, steadying them while simultaneously recalibrating the route. Her coordination and foresight were flawless, each decision executed with precision that left Walker momentarily speechless. By the time the team reached the base of the cliff safely, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky with streaks of crimson and gold. The exercise was complete, yet its significance extended far beyond physical accomplishment. Emma had not only demonstrated unparalleled skill and leadership, but had also solidified the team's confidence in her. The respect she earned was not superficial. It was deep. earned through decisive action under extreme conditions and tempered by calm authority. Walker approached her, boots crunching on the gravel. His usual stoic demeanor was softened, his voice betraying a rare vulnerability. "I underestimated you," he admitted, eyes meeting hers. "Not because of skill or courage, I expected those, but because of everything else. Your composure, your judgment, your ability to lead without fear or ego. I misjudged what it takes to command respect in this program." Emma listened silently, her expression neutral, though inwardly she registered the shift in his demeanor. "It's not about proving anything to me," she replied, voice steady. "It's about protecting the team and ensuring mission success. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And leadership isn't about authority. It's about action and accountability." Her words were precise, and Walker nodded slowly, absorbing them fully. For the first time, he realized that her philosophy embodied everything he had once taught, but had allowed himself to forget. True leadership relied on integrity, not intimidation. The remainder of the evening involved debriefing and reflection. Officers praised Emma's performance, noting her tactical acumen, quick thinking under pressure, and ability to maintain team cohesion. Walker remained silent for much of it, reflecting privately on the lessons of the day. He had been challenged, humbled, and ultimately inspired by Emma's capabilities. The incident on the beach, once a source of his pride and anger, now felt like a prelude to a deeper understanding, a recognition that strength could manifest in unexpected forms. As night fell over Coronado, Emma returned to the barracks. Her body ached from the day's exertion, yet her mind was sharp. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the months of grueling training, the beach incident, the hearing, the Virginia exercise. Every trial had forged resilience, sharpened judgment, and tested courage. And through it all, she had remained unbroken, steadfast in her mission to lead and protect. Walker, meanwhile, lingered outside the barracks, staring at the darkening horizon. The ocean waves reflected the moonlight, endless and relentless, a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. He understood now that Emma Kane was not simply a trainee or a subordinate. She was a standard bearer, a demonstration of what true SEAL leadership required. He had been forced to confront his own pride, his own assumptions, and the limitations of authority untempered by action. And he had learned, perhaps reluctantly, that respect earned through competence and courage was far more powerful than any command enforced by rank alone. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new obstacles, and new opportunities to prove oneself. But Emma Kane had already achieved something enduring, the unshakable respect of her team, the acknowledgement of her capabilities by even the most skeptical superiors, and the quiet knowledge that she had endured trials that would have broken lesser candidates. She was not only surviving SEAL training, she was thriving within it, setting a standard that few could match. The night settled over the base, calm and eternal, and the sound of the waves carried a silent affirmation of her journey. Emma Kane lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, muscles still trembling from exertion, mind alert and focused. She had earned her place through skill, courage, and determination, and the respect of those around her was now undeniable. And somewhere, Captain Brent Walker, humbled and reflective, began to understand the full measure of what it meant to face someone who could not be broken by fear, authority, or intimidation. The early dawn over Coronado Bay carried a brittle chill, the sky painted in pale shades of gray and rose. Emma Kane adjusted the straps of her pack, eyes scanning the training grounds that stretched before her. Today was no ordinary exercise. It was the culmination of months of brutal training, the final field test, designed to push every trainee to the brink. Every muscle ached, every joint throbbed, but her mind was steady, sharp, and focused. She knew what lay ahead: exhaustion, danger, and decisions that could determine the outcome of the mission and the lives of her team. Captain Brent Walker approached silently, his boots crunching in the sand. He had watched her grow, endured his own pride being challenged, and slowly come to respect the young SEAL in ways he never anticipated. Today, he would follow her lead, his trust earned by her unwavering competence. The dynamic had shifted. She was no longer a trainee in his eyes. She was a commander, a strategist, and a force to be reckoned with. The briefing was concise. The final test was a multi-layered simulated hostage rescue and extraction exercise, set in a remote mock village built for the purpose of extreme tactical training. Teams were dropped from helicopters, navigated dense forest and rugged terrain, and faced live fire simulations, complete with obstacles, traps, and ambushes. Casualties were simulated, but carried consequences in scoring, requiring swift triage, decision-making, and leadership. Emma listened attentively, committing every detail to memory, visualizing routes, escape points, and contingencies. The helicopter's rotors sliced through the morning air as the team was deployed. Emma landed gracefully, immediately taking command. She moved silently and deliberately, scanning the terrain, noting vantage points, and organizing the team efficiently. Walker observed closely, noting the clarity and precision with which she led. She issued instructions in crisp, concise tones, ensuring that every trainee understood their role. Communication was seamless, confidence palpable, and the cohesion of the team evident in every action. The first simulated engagement came swiftly. Opposing forces emerged from the tree line, firing blanks that mimicked live rounds. Chaos erupted, trainees diving for cover, shouting commands, and attempting to engage. Emma did not hesitate. She directed suppressing fire, flanked enemy positions with calculated precision, and coordinated simulated casualty treatment. Every action was deliberate, every decision weighted by potential consequences. The team responded to her commands instinctively, moving as one, and maintaining operational efficiency under immense pressure. Midway through the operation, a complication arose. A trainee simulating a hostage was injured during an ambush, requiring immediate extraction under enemy fire. Emma assessed the situation, noting the terrain and the proximity of threats. "Cover fire on my mark," she ordered. 2 trainees moved into position, laying down suppressive fire. Emma advanced swiftly, securing the hostage and coordinating the team's movement back to a safer location. Walker, watching from a distance, was forced to acknowledge the tactical brilliance she displayed under extreme duress. The operation grew increasingly complex. Mines, simulated snipers, and booby traps challenged every decision. Emma moved with calculated agility, avoiding hazards, guiding the team, and ensuring casualties were managed efficiently. One simulated explosive detonated near a teammate, sending sand and debris into the air. Emma reacted instantly, pulling the trainee to cover, assessing injuries, and re-establishing communication lines. The precision and clarity of her commands under life-threatening stress left Walker both impressed and humbled. By the time the team reached the extraction point, fatigue was overwhelming. Muscles screamed, lungs burned, and every trainee's endurance had been tested to its absolute limit. Yet Emma remained composed, checking each member for injuries, coordinating signals for the helicopter pickup, and ensuring no one was left behind. Walker approached her as the team assembled, his usual authority tempered by admiration. "You've exceeded every expectation," he admitted quietly. Emma simply nodded, acknowledging the moment without fanfare. The helicopter descended, rotor wash whipping sand and debris around them. Emma led the team into the aircraft, ensuring order and safety despite the turbulence. Every trainee had survived the operation unscathed, a testament to her leadership, judgment, and tactical skill. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, Emma allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, reflecting on the journey that had led her here. Months of brutal training, the incident on the beach, the hearing, and field exercises had all prepared her for this moment. Walker stood beside her, silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "I thought I knew what it took to be a SEAL," he said. "I was wrong. You've demonstrated skill, courage, and leadership beyond anything I've seen. Not just physical strength, mental strength, composure, judgment under pressure. I've underestimated you, and I apologize for that." His tone was solemn, sincere, and Emma recognized the weight of the acknowledgement. Respect had been earned, not demanded, and it had been earned in the crucible of extreme challenge. As the helicopter carried them back to base, Emma reflected on what she had learned about leadership, courage, and resilience. Authority and rank could compel obedience, but true leadership inspired trust, confidence, and loyalty. The respect of a team was earned through action, integrity, and unyielding courage. Walker's acknowledgement, while important, was secondary to the internal knowledge that she had survived, led, and excelled where many others would have faltered. Back at Coronado, the debriefing emphasized the flawless execution of the mission. Emma's actions were highlighted as exemplary leadership, tactical awareness, and decisiveness under extreme stress were praised by senior officers. Walker remained in the background, observing and silently reflecting on the journey they had shared. He had learned the most profound lesson of all. The measure of a SEAL was not determined by authority or intimidation, but by courage, composure, and the unwavering commitment to protect and lead one's team. That night, as the ocean's waves crashed against the shore, Emma Kane stood alone on the beach, listening to the rhythm of the water and reflecting on her journey. She had endured physical exhaustion, psychological stress, and challenges to her authority, emerging stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The final test had proven her not just as a trainee, but as a leader, capable of commanding respect and ensuring the success of her team. Walker, observing from a distance, finally understood what it meant to face someone whose strength could not be broken by fear, intimidation, or authority alone. He had been challenged, humbled, and transformed by her example. In that moment, he realized that Emma Kane was more than a trainee. She was a standard-bearer, a testament to what it meant to endure, lead, and excel under extreme circumstances. The night was quiet, yet charged with meaning. Emma had faced the ultimate test and had emerged triumphant. She had proven her abilities to herself, her team, and even her harshest critic. And as she gazed at the horizon where the moonlight danced on the ocean, she understood that every trial, every challenge, had forged her into something stronger than she had ever imagined. A true Navy SEAL, unbreakable, fearless, and ready for whatever came next. The sun rose over Naval Base Coronado in a blaze of gold and amber, illuminating the ocean and the training grounds where Emma Kane had spent months forging herself into a Navy SEAL. The months of grueling exercises, brutal drills, and psychological tests had culminated in a single, undeniable truth: she was unbreakable. Yet the significance of her journey extended far beyond personal triumph. She had set a standard for leadership, courage, and resilience that would reverberate through the ranks long after her name became synonymous with determination. Emma walked along the shoreline, boots sinking slightly into the damp sand, reflecting on everything that had brought her here. She thought of the early days, when Captain Brent Walker had underestimated her, expecting fear, submission, and weakness. She remembered the beach incident, the knee to her head, and the silence that had followed, moments that had tested not only her physical strength, but the very essence of her character. She had endured, survived, and emerged stronger than anyone, including herself, had imagined. The training barracks buzzed with activity as new trainees arrived, wide-eyed and unsure, unaware of the intensity that awaited them. Emma's eyes followed them, and she felt a quiet sense of responsibility. The lessons she had learned about courage, composure, and leadership were not hers alone. They belonged to every person who would come after her, every recruit who would face the unforgiving demands of SEAL training. Her journey had become a legacy, one that could inspire others to rise above fear and adversity. Captain Walker approached, his boots crunching on the gravel. Unlike their first encounters, there was no tension in his steps, no prideful need to dominate. He had come to recognize Emma's true abilities, her leadership, tactical brilliance, and unwavering composure under pressure. "Kane," he said, his voice measured and respectful, "you've set a standard here that few could ever hope to reach. You've earned every bit of respect, not just from me, but from everyone who has witnessed your actions." Emma nodded silently. Words were unnecessary. The acknowledgement was mutual and profound. She had proven herself repeatedly, on the beach, during the hearing, in field exercises, and in the ultimate test, yet it was the respect earned, not the recognition, that mattered most. Her actions had spoken louder than any title, rank, or authority could. Leadership was not granted. It was demonstrated through courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment. The day's final exercise was ceremonial but symbolic. Trainees moved through a complex obstacle course one last time, each task a test of endurance, strategy, and teamwork. Emma led the demonstration, guiding the team with precision and clarity, her every decision reflecting the experience and wisdom she had gained. Observers watched quietly, impressed by the fluidity of her movements, the authority in her voice, and the confidence she inspired. She had transformed the very atmosphere, elevating the performance of everyone around her. Walker watched, silently reflecting on the transformation he had witnessed. He had come expecting to dominate, to assert authority, yet he had learned a far more valuable lesson. True leadership could not be forced. It could only be earned through competence, courage, and the consistent protection and guidance of those entrusted to one's care. Emma Kane had embodied these principles, and in doing so, she had redefined what it meant to be a leader in the eyes of all who observed her. As the exercise concluded, Emma gathered her team for a final debrief. Her voice was calm but authoritative, offering praise, critique, and encouragement. She emphasized teamwork, strategy, and accountability, highlighting the importance of each individual's contribution to mission success. The trainees listened intently, absorbing her words, inspired not just by her accomplishments, but by her example. Leadership, she demonstrated, was as much about uplifting others as it was about personal achievement. The ceremony concluded with formal recognition. Officers commended Emma's extraordinary performance, noting her leadership, tactical skill, and unshakable composure under extreme stress. Walker stepped forward, presenting her with the highest commendation awarded to trainees for excellence in both skill and character. "Lieutenant Commander Kane," he said, voice steady, "you have not only met every expectation, you have exceeded them, setting a standard for all who follow. Your actions have left a lasting legacy, one that will define the culture and integrity of this program for years to come." Emma accepted the commendation with quiet dignity. Her mind focused not on accolades, but on responsibility. Recognition was secondary to action, secondary to the commitment she had made to herself and her team, to lead, protect, and endure. The honor symbolized the journey she had undertaken, the trials she had overcome, and the transformation she had achieved through relentless determination. It was a milestone, but not the culmination. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma returned to the beach where her journey had once been tested most brutally. The waves lapped at the shore, rhythmic and eternal, a reminder of endurance, persistence, and the forces that shape character. She traced her fingers through the wet sand, thinking of the moments that had defined her path. The assault on the beach, the tense hearing, the grueling exercises, and the ultimate test. Each had forged her into a leader, a seal, and a standard-bearer for those who would follow. Walker approached once more, standing beside her in silent acknowledgement. "You've taught me more than I ever thought I could learn," he said quietly. "Not about tactics, not about endurance, but about leadership, courage, and integrity. You've earned my respect, and it's one I will never question again." Emma looked at him, eyes steady, recognizing the significance of his words. Respect had been earned, trust had been established, and the legacy of her example was now undeniable. The ocean's roar grew louder as night settled over Coronado. Emma Kane stood at the water's edge, reflecting on her journey, aware that her trials were far from over, yet confident in her ability to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Her body was strong, her mind sharp, and her spirit unbreakable. She had faced intimidation, aggression, and doubt, both from others and within herself, and had emerged victorious, a testament to courage, resilience, and unwavering integrity. Across the base, the echoes of her journey began to ripple outward. Trainees watched, learned, and were inspired. Commanders reconsidered assumptions, adjusting expectations to meet the standards she had set. And Captain Brent Walker, once her harshest critic, now stood as a silent witness to her transformation, humbled and enlightened by her example. Emma Kane had forged more than a career. She had forged a legacy, one defined by courage under fire, integrity in the face of challenge, and leadership that uplifted rather than intimidated. She had proven that strength was not measured by aggression or rank, but by action, perseverance, and the ability to inspire others to rise to their highest potential. And as the stars reflected on the ocean's surface, a quiet truth settled over Coronado Bay. Emma Kane was no longer just a trainee, no longer just a young officer with raw potential. She was SEAL in every sense of the word, unbreakable, fearless, and destined to leave a lasting impact on everyone who would follow in her footsteps. Her legacy was forged in sweat, pain, and unyielding determination, and it would endure far beyond the fleeting moments of any single exercise, field test, or challenge. The waves continued to crash against the shore, eternal and relentless, echoing the rhythm of a journey that had tested the very limits of endurance, courage, and leadership. Emma Kane watched, silent and resolute, aware that her story was not simply about survival. It was about transformation, inspiration, and the enduring power of unwavering strength. The legacy she had built was not hers alone. It belonged to every SEAL, every trainee, and every person who dared to rise above fear, doubt, and adversity. In the quiet of the night, as the ocean whispered its eternal song, Emma Kane smiled faintly. She had endured the impossible, led with clarity, and emerged triumphant. And though new challenges would come, she was ready as a leader, a warrior, and a force whose legacy would never be forgotten.